So, good afternoon. It's really a real pleasure to be with you today. So, I'm going to talk about the robots I build. So, I build robots that produce drawings. And when I say that to people, generally they say, oh, why do you do that? Because you can do that by hand, and it's such a human activity. So if I'm really bored, I just say, oh, it's just a way to pass time in an interesting manner. And otherwise, there's an official answer to this question, why I do this work. So I try to understand how people draw from life, how they observe reality, and how they transform that into movement that will make a drawing. So I try to understand what perceptual, cognitive, and motor processes are involved when we draw. But to do that, I try to simulate those processes in a computational model, in an embodied computational model. But the real answer, the real motivation for this work is a bit different. It's totally embedded in my personal story. So I have to go back in time. I have to go when I was a kid. So my mom was an artist. She was trained as an artist. And my dad was an engineer. So I had those two influences in my life. And when I was about 10 years old, I got given a small computer that you can see on the slide there. It was quite primitive. It was just at the beginning of the personal computer revolution that was going to happen shortly after. So as a 10-year-old kid, I really played with it, tried to make things happen, program, and it was only programmable in machine language. But I managed to do some little things, and what fascinated me at the time was the possibility to create autonomous things that could behave on their own. So what happened is that, so I continued like that, fascinated by computing, really enthusiastic. So I thought, oh, I'll study computing and make a living out of that, because everybody said there would be a lot of work in this discipline, in this industry. It was really the beginning of computing. I mean, not beginning of computing, but beginning of this type of computing. And so I studied computing, but I made a mistake. I studied business computing. And so after when I did my studies, I never worked in computing because I found it boring and unbearable to make software, to do accounting or things like that. That was not why I studied computing or what I was interested in. But the good thing is that that made me move from Paris to London and become a painter. So during the following 10 years, I really tried to be a painter, or I was a painter. I put all my passion into that, and I worked very hard as much as I could. I had exhibitions in Paris and London. And, but during this time, yeah, I was really passionate, but perhaps a bit too much. And I kind of lost touch with reality. I was becoming a bit mad, and I kind of lost my ability to function in society. And so it was really problematic. So some things happened, and I was diagnosed with a mental illness. And so to reintegrate society, I got given some drugs and some treatment and things, and it worked. I was able to function again and to be able to be part of society. But the problem, what happened is that I lost my, my passion for art or for doing things by hand. So it was problematic because at this time I was 30-something, and I had already invested so much of myself into that, or I thought that was going to be my life. But then I remembered that I had another passion, that computing was an early passion, so I went back into that. And computer had changed a lot, and there was the internet, so it was possible to learn on your own. And computers were amazing compared to these little things that I had. Yeah, oh, I forgot to move the slide, sorry. Yeah, that's, so now I'm going back a bit. about the painting. The thing is that when I was painting, I was really trying at some, I mean, along all my career as a painter, I really tried to represent the human being, represent faces, not really portraits, but really represent the human being. And I've never been satisfied with what I was doing in painting. The only thing that satisfied me were those small drawings that you can see behind me, this kind of very fast drawings. So when I went back into computing, the first thing I did and I tried to do is to try to do what I could not, to make the computer do what I could not do by hand anymore, and to simulate the processes I was using when I was drawing. So in a certain way, to create prosthetics for my loss of ability to create. And so the first 2 years I worked on my own. And so I learned from the internet, I learned new languages, I learned about computer vision and all the new technologies that were accessible. And so those are, like, what you can see behind me is the first kind of results that I had. And for that, I used a big pen plotter, which was the things that were before the printer, where you really had a pen moving on the paper. So there are big machines made for architects and engineers. They were very cheap at the time on eBay. You could get them for $100 or something like that. And after that, I felt limited, so I joined a master, because in England it's easy to join a master when you're a bit older. And for my master, I did a software which was based on the same idea, trying to simulate what I was doing by hand. And always I've not tried to get a specific result. I tried to simulate processes and see what happens. But it's always kind of inspired by the way I was trying to do and trying to get the computer to do better things that I was doing by hand when I was doing things by hand. So it gave this kind of result. And that was totally non-robotics, that was totally simulated. And then I started to use robots because I thought, oh, drawing has to be with an arm moving and with a pen really on the paper. Because when we look at the drawing, we see the traces of the artist who has made the movement. And this is very important in the way we perceive drawings. So I'm passing this one. So I started to build those small robots, and I exhibited it the first time. So it didn't do very good drawings, but I noticed that people were fascinated by robots, especially robots that made portraits. So now, I've started to get better results with the drawing. And I'm going to show you a video. So if you can play the video, actually. That's an exhibition. I think it ended a couple of weeks ago, or 2 or 3 weeks ago. So you can see this time I've got 5 robots doing portraits of the same person, a bit like in a live drawing class. That was the idea at the beginning. And you see that I still do a lot of work, actually, with the robots. The robots haven't taken over everything. I still have to change the paper. So I'm a bit the slave to the robot in a certain way. So I'm putting the pins now. Now I'm giving them the signal to start, because I have to tell them, oh, you have to start to work, there's somebody in front. You have to look for the person. So with that, I just move their arm. And it's like to wake them up. Because that's the only thing they do, those robots. They are just obsessive drawers. They don't know anything else. Artists are like that sometimes. And on the 2 last one, I wake them up by knocking on the table. So now, when it's like that, they do a few movements. And then they're looking for a person, so they're looking for a face. And then they've found the face, so they're going to start to draw. And they keep looking and looking at the paper, and looking at what they're doing, looking at the sitter. Okay. And it's quite an experience for the person who sits there to have those robots looking at them. And it's funny because I talk to the person, because I'm always there to check that the robots are behaving. And people think that they have different personalities because they move in different manners and they have different cameras to look. So people project things onto the robots. Robots, they're all the same, it's the same software. The only differences are the cameras. And the sign at the end. I don't know what they sign, but. So it's almost perfect timing. I have 30 seconds to conclude. Talking not really about science fiction, but it's kind of predicted that we will have robots in our own home, and we have already robots everywhere. We've got the drones, and we've got the vacuum cleaners. In hospitals, there are robots to carry things around. But when we will have robots in our home, I think because they won't have artificial consciousness yet, they will seem a bit autistic, they will seem a bit further away with their social skills. And like for human beings who have problems with, with artists sometimes have problems with integrating society. I think that all robots should have artistic skills to help them to communicate with humans. Thank you.